Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Heather Jameson. I'm the Strategic Initiative Lead with the Montana After School Alliance, and we're excited to have you on for our first of 3 parts for a Winter Wonder series exploring some Montana-based resources with our partners and programs in the state. I just launched a quick poll just to see where everyone's coming from, and it's looking like, I'll share them out in a second. Let's see, most people are coming from, keeps on moving. Eastern Montana's in the lead right now. And are working with majority 3rd to 5th grade. Oh, let's see. I want a few more in from the waiting room. So for a little bit of housekeeping, we will be recording this session today so that we could share it out as a resource afterwards if people were unable to join live or would like to review it later again. And we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if there's any questions, or feel free just to hop on and unmute yourself to ask questions throughout. We have a few guest speakers for joining us, which we're really excited about. We have Susie Taylor and Julia, who helped put together this presentation and the kits. And they're joining us from the Montana State University Science, Math, and Resource Center. We also have Megan Jarkov. She's joining us from the Department of Sustainability and Environment from the University of South Dakota. And then Stacy Levine from and she's a traditional knowledge keeper and member of the Pontiac tribe in Nebraska joining us. And they'll be hopping on throughout to review some of the activities and give some of their experiences helping design the activities as well. So we'll be looking at the Land Use Explorers Kit, and I'm going to drop that into the chat. Once my chat thing shows up on the top of my screen. Let's see. Is everyone hearing me okay? And seeing well? Perfect. Well, it's deciding not to hover right now, but I'll get Susie or Julia to drop that in there for us. That'd be awesome. And so before we get started, just a little bit about the Montana After School Alliance. If this is your first time joining us, we're a statewide nonprofit, and we work to increase partnerships across the state, support policy and program support to advance out of school time in Montana. And we're a part of a 50-state network. So there's one of us in all 50 states. So we have a lot of opportunities and resources to pull from, and we're here to support you guys in the field. One of our main funders for this series is the Million Girls Moonshot, and their goal is to get 1 million girls into STEM and to reimagine who can engineer, who can build, and who can create. And so this is a 5-year initiative, but in year 3, they've already had 1.5 million girls accessing more STEM opportunities throughout their programs. We also, through the Million Girls Moonshot, have implementation partners from across the nation that we could bring in as Montana resources. But most importantly, it hosts positions like mine that could connect our out-of-school time professionals in Montana to partners from across the state. So we were working on this project with Susie, and I'm going to hand this over to her in just 1 minute to introduce the Land Use Explorers project and how it came into design and now into activity guides that you guys can implement into your programs. So Susie, if you want to hop on and
all right, sounds good. Thanks, Heather. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Susie Taylor. I'm with the Science Math Resource Center. We're a STEM outreach center in the Department of Education at Montana State University in Bozeman. My colleague Julia Wente is also here with us. And so what we're going to share with you today, just a very brief overview of how this activity book and kit came to be, a little bit about the research. You'll meet one of our research scientists from the project, Dr. Megan Jarko from the University of South Dakota. So as you can see on the screen, the name of the research project is called Wafer X. It was funded by the National Science Foundation, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Does that sound about right, Megan? It's been a little while. Wafer X stands for Water, Agriculture, Food, Energy, Research, Nexus. So basically, these are a team of scientists from South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana who are studying how all those different systems affect one another. So basically, how would a change in agriculture affect water? What if we grow more biofuels crops for energy? How would that affect our food supply? There's some pretty complex research behind it, a lot of computer modeling, but it was very interesting to work with this research team and try to figure out, okay, how can we take what they're doing in all these cool research areas and turn it into something that kids and educators can do to understand the research. So we can go on to the next slide there, Heather. The project is all about what happens in the upper Missouri River Basin. So that includes Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming, the researchers on the project, but also North Dakota and a little bit of Canada. We can go on to the next one. And so to kick us off today, I want to do an activity that I sometimes do with kids. I've done it with middle and high school kids. You could think about whether this could work with elementary kids. And we're going to do it pretty fast, and we'll use the chat. So I'm going to ask everybody 3 questions. Everybody has to give at least one answer. You can give a couple if you want to. And again, I'm kind of modeling an activity that I often do with kids to get them thinking about basically where they live, what is their place on Earth? So here's the first question. Go ahead and use the chat to answer. What is something that you love about your community? You can list many things or one thing, and it can be anything. Something that you love about your community. Oh, cool. I'm seeing some good stuff. So small, so many of us know each other. Mountains, welcoming nature. Small and everyone is connected. Community, togetherness, sense of pride, access to wilderness. My community looks out for families within. I love it. This is cool. I have not actually done this question with adults, but it's really similar to what I see from our middle and high school kids. Really awesome. I'm going to move pretty quickly, but when I do this with kids, we usually spend some time. Sometimes kids like to talk about it, tell a story about their family or their pet or what happens in their community. So let's go on to the second question, which is, what is something special about the place where you live? And I'm talking about your place on the earth. So it might be something that you've already written, like mountains or a river, but think about very specifically the geographic place where you live. And what is something special about that place? Cool, I see Flathead Lake in the mountains, Vermilion River. Ooh, beautiful waterfalls, cool. Ooh, Glacier and Yellowstone, lots of wildlife. Oh my gosh, awesome. Okay, this is really cool. And again, we would typically spend some time on this. Kids really like to think about this, and sometimes they haven't thought about it before. So they like to talk about it. And then here's our last question. What is a challenge that is faced by the community where you live? This could be anything. Just think about a challenge that's happening in your community. Housing prices, poverty. Oh, wow. Not a lot of resources, addiction, socioeconomic status. Wow, cool. Good stuff. Yeah, it's amazing. These are very similar to what I see from the kids. And I'm going to kind of end here, but this is a questioning activity that could take quite a while. Kids like to talk about these. And then where we usually go with that is, okay, let's talk about homelessness. How could we as kids help with this challenge by using information and data that we can get through science. So what kind of information would we need to do? Is there a map that we could use? What kinds of images or satellite imagery could we use? So anyway, I think that's a good way to set up some of the activities in the book. And kids really do like this activity. If any of you end up doing it and want to give some feedback to me, I would really appreciate it. And I will put those questions in the chat and on our webpage if you want to return to them. Okay, Heather, I think we're now kicking back over to you for an overview of the Land Use Explorers Kit and everything that's in it. And I do want to say, I can't remember if we mentioned this already, but I know some of you have received a physical kit. Even if you did not, many of the items in the kit are easily accessible items, and everything that you would want to have for the instructor guide and for the activities is free to download on the website. All right,
Perfect.
over to you, Heather.
Yeah, so we were able to, for those who registered and applied before the cutoff day, we're able to send off kits, and we've been getting emails back that they've been received. So thank you for doing that. And like Susie mentioned, in the kit, there are activities based on the Land Use Explorers Guide and the materials to use them with your students. But most of them are ones that you could pick up from your own site or just pick up at the store or potentially at your school site too. So inside the activity guide, this guide is geared towards grades 3 to 5, but always the opportunity to reach higher or lower with it. And in the sections, we have our world, land uses, and land connections, and each of the sections kind of build off each other with activities. And based mostly on observations, understanding what's out around in their own communities, and then evaluating that. And we'll dive deeper into those activities on the next few slides. But as the guide's laid out, you'll have kind of a little background information, prep for the activity, time each activity will take, material list, and even ways to explore more and align to next generation science standards. So for the first section, we're going to look briefly at our world and some land uses, and I'm going to pass it off to our guest speakers to dive deeper into the activities. All of these pictures is pretty funny putting together right now. A few days ago when we were like -45 here in the Bozeman area, and I was like, well, I don't think we're going to have students out, you know, with bare hands anytime soon. But now we're at 50 as our high today, so you never know getting students out during this time of year. But this activity is a great one to do with students, especially if you have the opportunity to repeat it throughout kind of the change of seasons from winter to spring, because each time they go out, there's a lot going on in the region that we live in, especially as we're coming out of winter and things start to come back out. Or even surprisingly in winter, there's a lot of neat sensory observations like sounds and who's really out there, and not as much distraction from the liveliness of springtime. So for this activity, for number one, it's looking at kind of small little habitats and really focusing your observation skills. Students will then question what they're seeing and what they know what they're seeing, and then then they're going to try to connect those questions into what's going on around them. For this activity, students will be either outside, depending on the age, in their own selected area, or you could have a pre-selected area, or as grades advance, you could have them on a transect line with, you know, measured out a really distinct and precise locations that they could go out and do repeat observations at the same site if they'd like to. But this activity is kind of a pick up and go, and mostly they need is just they're practicing their observation skills, and they could take notes either on just a sheet of paper or a clipboard or through drawing, but really looking at what's going on there and trying to make the connections of what are they seeing, how are things connected to each other, and that smaller, either I've even seen hula hoops used for this, smaller designated areas where they're really looking in close at a small designated area, and then what's around larger around them. Has anyone done this activity with their students before? This one, the natural History Center out of Missoula. They host a session on this activity, and it's a great one if you ever get an opportunity to join them during a conference, or if we have them on here. They do a great job really practicing those skills of observations. For activity 2, it's another activity that practices the skills of observations, and this one could be done from inside or like a vantage point where you could see. So another one that you could do during this time of year, or taking students outside throughout all seasons. And it's looking at what is in the view of your, I think it's kind of blurred because I have my background blurred, but what's in the view of your picture frame. And so this is just taking a piece of cardboard or a piece of paper and designating a small, could be any size, but we just used a whole sheet of this paper. And for younger kids, you could, tape this up to a window if you have them all lined up and have them looking out and identifying where the horizon is, what perspectives are they seeing, what is out in that picture, and looking through the frame in the mindset of, well, what is in the picture? Is it mostly man-made? Is it human-made? Are they natural scapes? Who uses this space? And a lot of those questions we have listed in the guide too, to dig deeper into those, evaluating what the space is used for and what they're seeing and how they're interpreting the space around them. So those are 2 activities on just not grounding students, but getting them into the mindset of looking around them and interpreting what they're seeing, what the spaces are used for, and how they interact with their space, and how different things in those spaces interact together. These meet a lot of the standards of looking at diversity, ecosystems, interactions, transfer of energy, and the different dynamics that we have in our natural worlds. Are there any questions on those 2 quick activities? Okay. Oh, I like how we've done this at different times of the year. So this is, that's a great, just seeing different seasons and what they notice, or learning about seasons and what species are out there or what's changing. And I really enjoy the practicing of the observations of well, what do you hear? Even just smell. How does the smell different every time you go out? That's a big one here. We have such swings and seasons too.
Heather, I see there's a cool suggestion in the chat to do this as kind of a scavenger hunt. It says it helps some kids to have a list of things to look for, especially for kids who can struggle with confidence in their own observations. I like that idea.
That's a neat one. Just having them interact and their surroundings in different ways. Super helpful. Yeah, the taste. Depends on, we always get that one. Which of your senses do you use? And usually, I don't know. Sometimes it's if you want, well, it depends on what it is, but whatever your program decides. Okay, so for the next section goes into land uses, and this one is looking at after we lay the groundwork of observations and develop or practicing our observation skills. Now, really, how can we compare how different spaces are used and how we interact with those spaces too? So how we use our space is one where students will actually draw a diagram of a scale-to-scale replica of how they are using their space. So this could be your classroom, it's probably blurry, but your classroom or your multi-purpose room or even an outdoor space. And they're taking the time to observe, okay, what features do I have in this room or in this area? What are they designated for? And then this could go way off into percentages of space used. You could tie in a lot more math components into this activity, breaking down, who's using the space. Does the space change throughout the day? And some of the extensions of this is, the imagine, if you could change the space in any way, how could you or would you want to, within the constraints of your zone and its uses, create it into the space that you want it to be. So those are some neat ways of looking at your space, and it meets some drawing or art and also scale and spatial standards as well. Do you think everyone in the participants that like your school site or your after school site program would have a space available to do this time of year, or is it something you'd want to take more outside versus inside? And it could be on outside, okay. Yeah, it could be on different scales too. It could be, how big of a space do they want to recreate? But this one, yeah, you could determine your own scale for your grid. And in the back of the activity guide, there's a print resource, so you could photocopy it out for students, or you could have students create their own scales too and draw it out. Okay, and then so for the next activity for how we use our space, this one's a neat one. I think that would fit well for this time of year. It could go before some of the other activities, and it's actually looking at aerial or satellite images of the locations where you live and then recreating them into a mosaic or with Mod Podge of magazine pieces and identifying which colors represent which features on the landscape. And this could be done, the state of Montana, because you could see the colors across the whole state, or it could be done to, community size or even to on the smaller scale as well. There are comparing different land features or different uses based on the satellite imagery, and is a neat way to represent land use based on geographical features. And this is just, yeah, piece of paper, colors of magazines or scratch paper, glue sticks, and Mod Podge. To get the satellite images, you could go onto Google and Maps, and then there's an icon in the bottom that you could toggle off a satellite view versus a street view. And hopefully could display it on a projector, or you could print out an image, or even some of our local departments of environmental quality or some of our state departments could potentially provide some really cool maps too, I'm guessing. So that was a whirlwind of the first 2 sections of the book, but we're going to take the rest of our time together today to kind of really dive deep into the last section of the books, which is our land connections. And for this section, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Stacy Larvine, and she'll be joining us to go over Activity 5, Exploring Traditional Ecological Kinships.
Dati, everyone. Let me introduce myself traditionally. My name Ijaje Wiwitike Stacy Larvie, Ponka Ijaje Mekae. My name is Stacy Larvie. My Ponka name is Star. I am a Ponka member of Ponka Tribe of Nebraska. My people have two, we're divided. My Moshte relatives are in Oklahoma. So the Ponka Tribe of Nebraska is just my governmental aspect to my indigeneity. I, however, prefer to say I am Ponka. For this section, I'll tell you a little bit of my history and backstory, because it is very much connected to my work and what I do. I grew up along the Missouri River and the Ponka Creek and Niobrara. During my time growing up, my great-grandfather, my Gaha, he lived by Nishude, which is what we call the Missouri River. During this time of growing up with my great-grandfather, he raised me and my siblings for a time, as well as my father. And during that time, he was already in his 80s, and he could speak fluent Ponka. He knew the land like the back of his hand. He knew every plant, every species. He kept his own journal. My father actually did the same thing. Throughout my life, I learned that we are very much intertied with everything around us. We did not put things in categories or species in categories, or to us, it was everyone played a role and we all lived in this circle of life. So for my part, it's activity number 5 in the book, exploring traditional ecological kinships. I'll be talking about the kinships. I will also be talking about traditional ecological knowledge, which actually traditional ecological or any kind of stewarding or conservation of the lands, even within agriculture, alternative agriculture, I will say. A lot of those ways were being done since time immemorial from, my indigenous relatives. Now we just call it permaculture or, something alternative and catchy. But we actually have been doing these things for a very long time. So I am also a descendant of Chief Standing Bear. He is my great 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 grandfather. A lot of my knowledge actually came from him and passed down. We have areas along Nishude and Ponca Creek that now are destroyed and no longer there due to colonization and like Army Corps coming in and agriculture. But we had ancestral farms there. My father and I were able to go out back in 2018 before the flood and gather seeds from these areas. My father had a dream that we had to do that, and now I know why. So we are very interconnected, not just with the land in that area, but all across Turtle Island. And so, okay, I can go off track very easy and go to the weeds. So I wanted to talk to you about what exactly TEK is, which is traditional ecological knowledge. Traditional ecological knowledge is knowledge that we'll use indigenous people. They have knowledge of the land that the modern day scientists do not have or are just now grasping it. So for instance, someone may go out and look at corn a certain way and just say, oh yeah, that's corn and here's the seed and we put it in the earth and we do this and do that. Well, my people, we had connection to water. We brought forth nutrients from the water. We would burn ash from the trees. We would do all these things and use all the kinships that we had around us. TEK, traditional ecological kinships, is the practice and belief that humans, plants, animals, land, and water are all related and work together to thrive in an ecosystem. And with that, we can actually go back and see what the devastation has been done from, if we go to like California, we can see what the dissolvement of keystone species effects and the slaughter of the bison in the 1800s and early 1900s, what that has done to our ecosystems. Sorry, sometimes I get emotional when I talk about these things. So the relationship that we have with these keystone species is very spiritual. They are part of our families. How we structure our tribal, I guess, our tribal like hierarchy of how we're supposed to be in this circular unit, we very much use that framework from the bison. And the bison was a keystone species. A keystone species is the main component in a ecosystem that helps it thrive. And here on the prairies, we are actually trying to revive a lot of our prairies here in Nebraska. And I'm sure there's parts of South Dakota where the climate's the same. The ecosystems are pretty similar. And when we removed the bison, we also dismantled, along came the prairie dogs. That's another keystone species. And they actually supported over 280 plus different species and plant life. So this activity really, I wanted students to acknowledge and really try and observe like the behaviors of each little life form that is in these circles of life. And also realizing the spirit and the livelihood of it, that everything has a role and a place. If you look at what happened in California, the removal of the passenger pigeon, that played such a vital role in the ecosystems. And then, comes the removal of trees, and the passenger pigeon actually had a lot to do with that natural ecosystem, and were part of the culture of certain nations out there in California. So when they removed that, there was a time where fires would happen and seasons would happen with those fires. And now it's, if you really want to dive down in passenger pigeons, I really think you should. But for us, the bison was a really huge one. And even in South Dakota, all the way up to North Dakota, across the plains, this has been a detriment to tribal nations. And now settlers who came are feeling those effects as well. So yeah, this part, I just wanted them to identify a keystone species. Within this, it has like a list here of like some basic keystone species that would be in an ecosystem. I know the Land Explorer book basically has everything you need. It even has like field guides in there. I've used it actually in some activities this fall. And within the book, I've actually used the other activities, but brought in some Ponca language and also our teachings of specific things that would work with those activities. So let me go back here. I'm not even going to attempt to bring it up on the computer, but so we have this diagram in the back. And what I wanted them to do is actually create a diagram that they would identify a keystone species. And I used milkweed and butterflies and pollinators as an example, just because, it's one of the most common kinships that I think would be, the most common, and then go from there. So the milkweed actually is the keystone species. And then, we have the butterfly, the effects of that and what it does for us. And it's all circular, it's all a web, and it's all very much connected. And one thing I didn't get in here is actually what would be in the soil what kind of soil would be the micro. You can take this as far as you want. That's why there's really no age limit on these activities, I don't think, because with this, you can even go as far as like soil science and what's in the soils, even for certain species. So students will go identify a keystone species, and within the activity kit, it has like a whiteboard almost effect where you can dry erase, and you're able to use it over and over and over again. So that's basically the gist of what I was trying to go for, bringing in those ancestral connections of the first peoples that were here, tying it to modern sciences, because traditional ecological knowledge is very important in sciences. I do a lot of archaeology work as well, and work with archaeologists, many different sciences. And I mean, literally, I can sit there and just put traditional ecological knowledge into everything because it isn't everything. You know, we were scientists before, you know, colonization, and I think it's a pretty clear cut. It takes about, you can do the activity within like 30-50 minutes, but I mean, you can go all day if you want. And I mean, sky's the limit with this activity. I mean, that's basically the gist of my portion.
Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, are there any questions for Stacy? I'll also have some time at the end too, but feel free to drop them in the chat or hop off of mute.
Yeah, I try to keep things short because I can talk about this all day. So
we really appreciate your time and your expertise. And Stacy is also highlighted as one of the Meet the Scientist in the back of the guide. So she'll have, there's a little more background information and how her role as a scientist helped with this activity book and helping advance their understanding of and knowledge of the world around us. So thank you so much, Stacy, for your time. And we appreciate you being here. Our next activity, is activity 6, what do you value about the land? And we're gonna bring on Megan Jarko and have her talk a little bit about the research that took place that helped guide this activity.
Yes, thank you. So I'm at the University of South Dakota, so not in Montana, but what I'm going to do is talk for just a couple minutes about the research that was done as part of the Way4X project and sort of the work that we did with adults. And then Susie will talk about the activity, and because she's done it with kids and sort of the thoughts with that. So if you could go to the next one, Heather. And so part of it, and I say this as much as I can, I feel like in sustainability, we've done a poor job of saying what sustainability is. And I think people understand it to sort of be challenges in this world and problems or fear, guilt, and shame about what's coming or what we're not doing, what we should be doing. And I really believe that sustainability asks the questions, what kind of world do we want and how can we affect change to create that world? And so in that way, visioning and what we would love to see is foundational to sustainability. And so I like in the activity and in the research, we didn't exactly foreground it that way, but it's got this idea of helping people think about what is it that we value? Because if we don't explicitly ask people, then I think sometimes it's implicitly, around, and like Susie's activity at the beginning, I love, how can we help people make explicit some of these things that probably are in their brain? But if we can better understand it, I think we can do a better job of helping people feel more hopeful about how they might move forward. So next slide, please. As you already saw, this research sort of was grounded in the upper Missouri River Basin. And this is land that agriculture is the dominant land use. So you can see row crops are that peacher color that's a little hard to see, but is, circling around the eastern and northern edge of it. And then of course, grassland is a whole big chunk of the area. And so there's a lot of livestock. And then also in North Dakota and Wyoming, especially, energy extraction is a huge part of the economy. And so we're in a super unique region in that the land really is foundational to the economy of the region, but of course it's also foundational to we live there. So the research that we did, Heather, the next one, please, is we did door-to-door surveys in the communities here. We got just over 1,000 completed surveys. And we asked people then across the basin, you know, what is it that you want to see on your landscape? And a couple of bits, we sort of asked, and I'm only talking about part of it here, but what is it that is there now? And then what would you like to see in the future? With the idea that sometimes people are a little bit more grounded in, or the visioning part, sometimes if you ask about the future, that helps people get there a little more. And so you can see in the activity, there's sort of both of those bits. But in the survey, we asked people, how much do you value having the following on the landscape in your area? And then a 5 is they more strongly desire it, a lower number less strongly desire it. Next, Heather, if you added the animations. So you can see what people really value. They do recognize that agriculture is foundational to the area. And again, these are adults that we were conducting research on. But they also love these non-economic things of native plants and animals. But then you can really see that using the land to provide food ends up really high. And interestingly, what's pretty low or is lower are sort of the energy and development-y things are not as much what people value. Next slide, please. And then if we say this similar thing, but what would you like to see on the landscape in the future? The same scale where higher is they desire it more. Animation, please. Next. That you can see what they really do love. They still think agriculture is super important. They think hunting is important, but it really is some of the more beautiful aspects of our landscape. And again, more so than some of the development or energy, even renewable energy in the area. And so, you know, the activity, if you look at it, it asks these similar questions, but in a different way. Next, please. And so the idea is that you're helping youth think about, you know, what individually is it that they value in the landscape? And then it starts to talk about these trade-off parts and have them be sort of explicit about, you know, I really value this for having open space. And, you know, we also, someone else might value it for wind turbines. Are those compatible or are they not? How might we think about that? And so the hope would be that this sort of helps youth, as it does hopefully the adults, be more explicit in thinking about what is it that we value in our landscape. And as a shameless plug, before I turn this over to Susie, Susie and I both think this would be delightful. We've done this research in adults, you know, so we had 1,000 adults that completed this survey. See in a more researchy way what youth actually value in their landscape. So if anyone is looking for a research project for anything, you could let Susie or I know, because we are still keenly interested in seeing if we could find a way to see, do youth and adults differ in how they value the landscape? So that shameless plug aside, I'm now going to turn it over to Susie, who's going to talk about actually doing the activity with kids.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. I think that's a great idea. If anybody's working on a master's degree and needs a capstone project or some other research, we have been thinking about this for quite a long time. And I did want to mention that Dr. Megan Jarko is also one of our featured scientists in the book. Again, if you don't have the physical book, you can download it for free online. And I neglected to say earlier, I wanted to give a credit to Dr. Rose Valor. She's here at Montana State University. She helped us create the very original Land Use Explorers resources. Rose is also the president of the Montana Environmental Education Association. So great resource and great person. So it was a pleasure to work with Megan to transform her research into an activity for kids. I have done this with middle schoolers, so I just wanted to give you a little advice from my end of the things. These are what the cards look like. Again, you can print these out for free online, or they would be in your kit. On the back are pictures of the different ways that the land is used, just like Megan used in her research. So the way I've done this with kids, we have them cut apart the card decks. You can also do this with index cards. You can just write the things on the cards, but again, you can print these out. You might want to think about ahead of time if your kids have time to cut them out themselves, or if you want to have them already cut out. We wanted to cut them out. It was just fun to do kind of the hands-on activity. They will need 2 sets, and separate them into 2 different decks. And what I asked the kids first is to arrange all the cards in the order of what they value the most. So just like Megan was asking people door to door, asking adults door to door, the kids would arrange those in order. They might say, I value land for livestock, hunting and fishing, all those same categories. And I guess I should say, first of all, if you want to have the discussion with your kids, just to make sure they understand what all of those mean. If they're not in an area where people are extracting fossil fuels for energy, they might not exactly know what that means. So you might take time and just discuss what each one is. So after they've done that, actually you can move on to the next slide there, Heather. We then take the second card deck and lay that below the others and show how the land around you is used most commonly. So then you start seeing a row of what the kids value and a row of how the land around them is used, and they can look for patterns. If they say, wow, I value hunting and fishing the most, but it's actually the least common where I live. So what is that saying to me? And then a last activity you can do, take that strip that shows how the land is used, take the 2 that are used the least and move them to the front of the line, thinking about, okay, wow, what would happen if these were the most? How would that change? How does that go along with the values that I put? And then just to kind of wrap up on this, you can see one of our kids there with the pile of M&Ms. That's not specifically for this activity, but it's something I actually learned working with college students. I had them graph their research data using M&Ms. They can do it almost any different way, and the kids actually found lots of different ways to do it. I just gave them all the different colors of M&Ms, and I had them kind of coached them through how to make basically a basic bar graph or any sort of visual representation of the data that they came up with while they were thinking through the exercise. I think that's about it for this one. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. And we can move on to the next section, Heather. I think this is just our transitional slide.
Yep. So yeah, that kind of concludes our overview of the activity guide. And like Susie said, it's available online, or those that have had hard copies sent to them. I want to give a big thank you and appreciation for our guest speakers today, and always partnering with Montana-based and our neighboring states makes the activities more relevant and to resonate with the students in your communities. So I hope that these activities are useful and can provide an opportunity for them to connect to the spaces and the landscapes around them. I appreciate all your guys' time. And so a big thank you to our guest speakers as well. The next couple of slides are just upcoming events. And another virtual event we have is a Ready STEM Go virtual conference. This will be happening in March. This will be the second year of the conference, and Montana After School Alliance has partnered with 6 other state networks to provide this. So we'll have a series of virtual speakers, resources, and a lot of pulling from our 6 states to bring in examples and panels and to ignite kind of STEM programming in after school programs. This is an in-person event coming up, and I'll make sure to send out these links in our follow-up email. But Montana After School Alliance is hosting our annual conference this April on the 19th and 20th in Butte. So if you're available to join us in person, we'd love to see as many of our out of school time professionals, and we'll have a range of guest speakers, similar to the previous conferences in the past, resources, and excited to have everyone gather in person. Next week, I can't believe it's February already, but we will have the Holter Museum of Art out of Helena joining us for our second part of the Winter Wonder series. So if you're able to join us, then we'd love to have you again. And then lastly, if you guys can complete the participant survey for today's session. We always enjoy hearing the feedback on our offerings and the reach of your guys' programs. And then I see a couple questions coming in. So if there's time for questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or hop off of mute. And oh, that's just Susie's questions about the questions coming in. So if there's any other questions, feel free to hop on, and we appreciate your guys' time this morning. And again, thank you to our guest speakers for joining us. And we hope that you guys could get this guide out there and working on some of these activities with your students.
Heather, I'm going to put a quick link in the chat too. I should have mentioned we have a monthly newsletter from our center. We share lots of free resources, grant opportunities, other events that are coming up for educators. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to include all these links and upcoming events in a follow-up email. And we have this session recorded too, so we could share that out as well. Thank you, everyone.